See if it's working. Who knows today if it's working or not? We'll see. Here we go. And I don't hear anything. Should we reload? If you're out there, you can say hello. That would also be a clue. I'll start either way. And we reloaded and see if it's coming up. It's working. Yep. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm John Miglosh. For the WDMA, we're fighting for direct mail every day. If you're a printer, if you're a mailer, get on board. We'll give you some crazy news. It'll give you inspiration to fight against the digital fraud. And especially today, we got some great stuff here for you today. So let's get over to the news. Okay, and first I want to talk about, ran across a really interesting story from CNBC about Salton, California. There was a Lake Salton. The Colorado River spilled off into the desert, and for decades in the 50s and 60s, it was a resort area, and there was enough water to have boating and fishing and all sorts of things, but eventually it's drying up because it isn't being refilled, and so it's kind of a ghost area. But there's also geothermal, and so there's about a dozen or something plants, geothermal plants, and they pump water through the brine and through the geothermal heat and make steam and make electricity. But they also, it turns out that the water that murks around in these mineral springs, it's kind of like Yellowstone Park, sucks lithium out. And I didn't know that there were major sources of lithium in the United States. So it's kind of optimistic. So let's just give that a little watch for a second here, if I can get over there, and I think you'll learn something.
Yet amidst this environmental disaster, the unique geology of the region has created a geothermal resource area that covers more than 10,000 acres. There are 11 operating power plants at the Salton Sea, 10 owned by Berkshire Hathaway and 1 by EnergySource. Together, they have the capacity to produce around 400 megawatts of clean geothermal energy, enough to power about 350,000 homes, over 7 times the number of houses in Imperial County, where the plants are located.
We are standing arguably in between the North American and the Pacific plates. So as the continents pull apart, the crust is thin. And so you have these hot magmatic bodies that come close to the surface.
Magma heats the surrounding rocks, and salty water called brine circulates among them. Minerals like lithium dissolve into the brine, which is used to produce geothermal energy when it's pumped to the surface and converted into a gas that turns an electricity-generating turbine.
Now watch this part.
Geothermal power plants have operated at the Salton Sea for 40 years.
Wow.
And traditionally, the leftover brine is just re-injected back into the earth.
Just dump it back down.
But as the electric vehicle market heats up, technology that can recover lithium from these brines is receiving increased attention and investment. But this isn't the first time that there's been interest in lithium recovery at the Salton Sea.
Well, anyway, so what they're saying is that they can take the lithium and extract it from the brine pretty much right away. It's sort of like 30 years ago, 40 years ago, the power plants in Wisconsin started using the softer coal from out in North Dakota, I think. And it had lots of sulfur in it, and so the sulfur would go up, and you could kind of smell it, but it would kind of precipitate back down onto the area around there, and so it made it really great for growing cabbage. But then the environmentalists decided that the sulfur was bad because of the acid rain back in Canada or something, and so now they inject calcium into the hot gases coming out of the coal plants, and they create gypsum. And gypsum is a calcium sulfur mix, sort of a chemical. And then the farmers have to buy it and spread it on the fields. But it's a beautiful thing, the way that the sulfur is extracted from the exiting gases. And it sounds like something like that with lithium. So I was real positive on windmills. Then I found out the economics. I was real positive on solar, and it's great if you're on a sailboat in the middle of the Indian Ocean, but it's maybe not as practical. We need all kinds of solutions, right? but I was troubled about the batteries and that we were getting our lithium from basically all from China, and I think Afghanistan has a lot of it. And so I'm pleased that there are lithium sources in the United States and that there are interesting and environmentally benign ways to get the lithium better than pretty much anywhere else in the world. So that's pretty exciting. And this one area, this Salton Lake Desert, whatever area, has the capability of producing all the U.S. needs and perhaps 40% of the world's needs. So there's quite a bit there to play with. And so, how cool is that? Let's get over to the PDF world. Boom, boom. There we go. Elon Musk put his Twitter sale on hold pending the examination of the bot level. Twitter claimed that there were no more than 4 or 5% bots on Twitter that were automated tweeting machines. Musk thinks it's more. In 2017, estimates ran about 15% of the tweets were from bots. And so he's going to sort it out. The stock today went down 15% on that kind of news. Interestingly, Musk a couple of days ago said, if our Twitter bid succeeds, we will defeat the spam bots or die trying. If someone is operating a bot and troll army, then I will I am definitely their enemy. On the other hand, mechanized boosting seems to have helped Tesla and Musk in particular on, this is the part I like the best, to present Musk as a model of manliness and the opposite of George Soros. So anyway, that's enough of that. Well, it'll be interesting to see if we really can get to the bottom of the bots, because constant improvement in bot technology is making them harder to spot, especially among the billions of supposed users on Facebook, Twitter, Google, etc. And sadly, up until now, Twitter, Facebook, and Google have had a vested interest in the bots because they validate digital advertising. As my friend Dr. Augustine Fu says, the big players, the big social media players, have little interest in getting rid of the bots because the bots give you clicks, even if they're completely baloney. They justify the digital media frenzy and the inflated prices. So if you wondered why I was talking about Musk, that's why. Okay, here's an excellent article by Mark-Ritson about if you don't invest 5% of your marketing budget in research, you don't know what you're doing. And this, you don't know what you're doing, is literally true. It's not just you don't know what you're doing in marketing. You don't know who your customer is. You don't know who your target audience is. You don't know the kind of offers that they respond to. And so this is generally an article that suggests that you should be doing 5% of your market budget should go to research. And unlike we'll get into the story. He says Daily Mail this week ran an article saying that the BBC bosses have a $50 million plan to find out what viewers want. Apparently, Daily Mail is a right-wing newspaper. I didn't know that. I just think if it's offshore, it's got to be better. I always like to look at Guardian stories and Daily Mail stories too. Okay. And according to the article, BBC has published a jargon-riddled invitation. I got involved with Toys R Us long ago before they went under, and they had an RFP for their data marketing database, and it was all jargon. It was all about think outside the box and we'll know our customers' needs and all the rest of the stuff. Now the trouble is that if you remember the jingle, I don't want to grow up, I'm a Toys R Us kid. Okay, but you do grow up. My kids grew up. We used to be like a fixture at the Toys R Us store. Send the kids in, let them play around in the aisles with the stuff, see what they like, send them back to the car, and one of us would buy the stuff. But they grew up, and their needs and wants changed. And as that bubble, the baby boomer babies bubble burst, Toys R Us was not going to solve it by knowing more about their customer if there were just fewer customers, and there were. And in fact, it was a mess. I can't get into it all, but I remember reading the RFP and just all jargon. It was basically in that case, I would guess, this is just pure speculation, that it was designed to attract investment, attract investor money, that they were going to revolutionize retailing and all that. Okay, so what a bunch of terrible things they've taken there. BBC is partly, or maybe all, funded by license fees and publicly funded. So they're taking public funds and they're putting them into research. Isn't that terrible? It staggers me. A member of Parliament, Julian Knight, says it staggers me they're looking at spending this sort of money at a time like this. Okay. So now Ritson says, well, first of all, it's a 4-year plan, so it's only $12.5 million per year. It's $1 billion. They spent something like $4 billion just in public service programming. So that, if you consider their marketing to be public service programming, then this is like 1% of that. Because they market themselves that way. Okay, so he says there's 3 types of research that typically brands do. The first is when there's a new CMO and they take a deep dive into or if a new product or market is contemplated. So when I was working with Lovesac, which is a retail store that sells furniture, they got a new VP of marketing at the time. They may have Patrick may be their CMO now, but he was a VP of marketing. And we talked a little bit, and he said, I'm thinking we don't really need to mail to our customers because our main, according to our research, which they were doing a whole bunch of research, focus groups and other things, he said, people haven't heard of us. Once they have heard of us, we are about as likely to get an order as Williams-Sonoma and other retail furniture stores that also offer online ordering. And I said, well, Patrick, let's find out. Let's test it. And he looked at me and he was like, how can you test it? And this is where I'm going to go with Ritson's article, is that he's right, but direct marketing gives us the tools to actually answer questions about our target market and about our market's preferences at a product level, at a branding level, and at an individual household level. And part of the way we do it is we have 3 or 4 basic tests. But the first one, which we used with Lovesac, was called a holdout test. I said, well, what we'll do is we'll mail your typical mailing, and we'll hold out about 10% of it. And we'll see how they do compared to the ones we mailed. Because the mail may still be having benefit. We see it as very profitable on our modeling and our basically EBITDA type P&L. The way we look at each individual mailing is like an EBITDA P&L. And he said, okay, let's try that. And so what we found was that there was a 300% return on investment, bottom line profit. So for every $1 they spent on the catalog, they got $3 back in profit after the cost of goods, after the cost of the catalog, etc., and the fulfillment, etc. So he said, well, I guess we better keep going. And so we did. And then as we were doing this matchback process, what we found out was that in addition to that, for every 1 order we got from customers, we got 2 from new customers. And what we speculate is that the catalog was either getting handed to neighbors and friends. Well, we were tracking the neighbors because we found lots of orders with the next door neighbor. And one of the things about mail that's very rarely talked about is this pass-along value. It's easier to hand a friend who's over at your house and says, "Where'd you get that nice couch?" And you've been mailing this customer regularly, so they know they're probably going to get another catalog someday. So they don't have any reservation in handing it out. Whatever the reason, we found a lot of orders of next door neighbors or in the same building or whatever, same street address, different apartment numbers, a lot of that kind of thing. And when we took those into account, it was a 900% return on investment. So every dollar you spent on the catalog, it probably generated about, for every dollar you spent, probably about $30 in sales, and about $10, $9 or $10 in additional profit. So what Ritson says is that when the new CMO comes, there's usually a deep dive. That's what we were doing. Second, there was lesser but common annual research and updates. Okay, and what the advantage, now I'm not going to say all modeling because I don't think most modeling, there's basically two ends of the spectrum in modeling. One is the regression modeling, which only has a few variables. You try to boil down every variable that's collinear, every variable that sort of tells the same thing, like dwelling value, the value of your house, is kind of related to the income, especially in a geography, right? So the education level is related to the income in an area, okay? Graduation rate. There's all sorts of things that are related and go alongside each other. So in regression, you try to get rid of all those and try to find the best one. And so you find 4 or 5 that really matter, and you sort your customers based on a weighting of those few elements. Now, the other end of the spectrum is machine learning, artificial intelligence, that sort of thing. Neural net, we used, well, anyway, and that will often have thousands of variables, and it will, in a certain sense, evaluate each person and decide on the basis of all this, of all kinds of, well, you don't even know what it's exactly doing, but it does work. It works, and usually works very well. You just don't know quite why. That's the other end. So one is very understandable, and one is very, very powerful. And what we've done is sort of meet in the middle, where we use a maximum of 500 variables. Can't use more than that. That's the limit. But you can sort through 1,000 and boil it down to the best 500. That's not hard to do. And then once you do that, you get an insight, because we see every grouping of customers. And that's what I went through with Dick Cabela when I taught him about machine learning. And what that does is it accomplishes the things that Ritson is talking about, and why you should have an ongoing research program. Then the third one is simple A/B splits, where you test different creative, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the advantage that mail has, I just want to mention, is that we not only know who ordered, which gives us the sort of one side of the data set. We know who the customers are that came as a result of a particular mailing, but we also know who got mailed and didn't order. And we know that mail got delivered. Unlike digital, we don't know if anybody saw the ad or not. We know maybe only bots. And many companies have stopped their digital, and nothing stops. And so, but we know that the mail, when it goes out, there's a bump, and we also know it gets delivered, because the post office can show us the informed delivery, or actually there's another word for it. I'm finally getting informed delivery down. It took me about 2 years for that. And so we know it gets delivered. Not only that, but we know it gets delivered to a decision maker, because not everybody in the household can decide what mail is junk and what isn't, right? So it goes to a decision maker in the household, and that decision maker has to engage with it. So we know that there's an awareness and an engagement by the non-buyers, and that gives us two sides of the data set required for machine learning. That's what you're building when you see a pop-up and it says, where are the fire hydrants, or where are the where are the stoplights? What you're doing is you're showing where they are, and also, more importantly, in some ways, where they're not. Okay, and that's for the auto driving cars. that's to train them to get millions and millions of pictures so they can recognize from all different angles the fire hydrants and the stoplights, most importantly. Direct mail is, as far as I know, the only media that gives you both sides of that data set. And so it's ideal for this kind of research that Mark Ritson's talking about. Now, the entire article will be available at wdma.org in a few minutes. All the show notes if you subscribe. So get over there, wdma.org/join, and hit the subscribe button, and you'll have access to all the articles that I reference every day. And there's really a wealth of information there, and they're all tagged and they're all dated, unlike YouTube or LinkedIn. Have a great day. Share. It's worth 20 likes in LinkedIn.